Here's the truth most people don't want to face. An avoidant doesn't lean in when you chase, explain, or overgive. They lean in when they feel strength, certainty, and grounded presence. And that doesn't come from trying to manage their emotions. It comes from mastering your own. The one boundary that changes everything is this: you stop making your emotional well-being dependent on their availability. Not as a strategy, not as a game, as a way of life. When you decide at a soul level, I am responsible for my state, I choose peace, I choose purpose, I choose alignment, something shifts, your energy shifts, your nervous system calms, your actions become clean, and suddenly you're no longer negotiating for connection, you're inviting it. Avoidant people are hypersensitive to pressure, but they are deeply responsive to certainty. When you stand rooted in who you are, when your yes is clean and your no is calm, you communicate safety without saying a word. You become predictable in the best way, grounded, self-led, whole. This boundary means you no longer over-explain. You don't plead your value. You don't audition for love. You show up fully and you let others choose. That choice is sacred. And when someone feels free to choose, they're far more likely to choose you. This is where divine principle comes in. Order precedes expansion. When you bring order to your inner world, the outer world responds. When you honor your time, your energy, your truth, you teach others how to meet you, not through force, but through embodiment. You don't withdraw to punish. You don't set boundaries to control. You set them to stay aligned with your highest self. And alignment is magnetic. Alignment is authority. Alignment is love without attachment. When you're no longer afraid of losing them, you stop acting in ways that guarantee loss. When you're fulfilled by your mission, your growth, your connection to something greater than fear, your presence carries weight. People feel it. Avoidants feel it especially because deep down beneath the defenses, they are looking for something solid, something real, something that doesn't collapse under distance or intensity. When you become that, when you live from purpose instead of panic, you don't need to be taken seriously. You simply are, and the right people will rise to meet you. Avoidant individuals do not respond to pursuit the way anxious or emotionally expressive people expect them to. The instinct to chase, explain, reassure, or prove worth often comes from fear of loss, but fear-based energy never inspires respect. What actually creates impact is clarity. Clarity of self, clarity of intention, and clarity of emotional ownership. Energy follows self-respect, always. The moment you abandon yourself to secure someone else, your energy weakens, and avoidant personalities feel that immediately, even if they can't consciously explain it. Clarity means you know what you feel, you honor it, and you don't outsource responsibility for it. Instead of asking, how do I make them choose me? The question becomes, am I choosing myself in this moment? That shift changes everything. When you are clear about your needs, your standards, and your emotional limits, you stop broadcasting uncertainty. Avoidants are highly sensitive to emotional chaos because it triggers their instinct to retreat. But when they encounter someone grounded and emotionally regulated, their nervous system relaxes. They feel less invaded, less controlled, less pressured. Chasing communicates urgency. Urgency communicates lack, and lack creates imbalance. When you chase, you're unconsciously saying, I need something from you to be okay. That message places a burden on the avoidant that they are wired to escape, not because they are cruel, but because their system associates emotional dependence with loss of freedom. Clarity, on the other hand, communicates wholeness. It says, I enjoy you, but I don't abandon myself for you. That is a language they understand. Self-respect is not loud. It doesn't threaten or demand. It simply stands. When you respect yourself, your actions align with your values. You don't tolerate inconsistency while explaining it away. You don't stay silent about your truth to maintain proximity. You express yourself once calmly, and then you observe behavior. That congruence between words and actions creates energetic authority, and authority is deeply attractive to someone who avoids emotional chaos. Avoidants often test, not consciously but energetically. They pull back to see what happens. Will you panic? Will you overextend? Will you collapse into overfunctioning? Or will you remain steady? When you remain steady, continuing your life, honoring your commitments, staying emotionally centered, you pass a test you didn't even know was happening. Your steadiness communicates safety without suffocation. Clarity also means letting silence speak. You don't rush to fill gaps with explanations or emotional monologues. You understand that connection doesn't grow through constant access. It grows through mutual presence. When you allow space without resentment, you demonstrate emotional maturity. Avoidants take that seriously because it shows you are not trying to control the rhythm of connection. Energy follows self-respect because people instinctively respond to those who value themselves. When you stop chasing, you reclaim your power. Your attention becomes intentional instead of reactive. Your time becomes sacred. And when something becomes sacred, others either rise to meet it or fall away. Both outcomes serve you. This isn't about playing hard to get, it's about being grounded enough that you don't get pulled out of yourself. The paradox is powerful. The more you center your life around your own growth, purpose, and emotional integrity, the more compelling your presence becomes. Avoidants don't lean toward need, they lean toward strength. And strength is quiet, clear, and rooted in self-respect. The most misunderstood idea about boundaries is the belief that they are tools to change someone else's behavior. In truth, a boundary has nothing to do with controlling another person and everything to do with honoring your own emotional sovereignty. Emotional self-sufficiency is the boundary that shifts the entire dynamic, because it removes pressure, manipulation, and fear from the connection. It says, I can stand on my own and I choose to be here rather than, I need you to regulate my emotions. Ultimatums are rooted in insecurity. They attempt to force closeness through fear of loss, do this or else. While they may create short-term compliance, they destroy trust and authenticity. Avoidant individuals in particular are wired to resist anything that feels like control. The moment an ultimatum appears, their system hears danger, not desire. Emotional self-sufficiency, however, communicates freedom. And freedom is the soil in which genuine connection grows. Being emotionally self-sufficient does not mean you don't care or that you suppress your needs. It means you take full responsibility for your inner world. You don't expect someone else to complete you, calm you, or give you permission to feel secure. You have learned how to soothe yourself, validate yourself, and ground yourself. From that place, you can express needs cleanly, without attachment to outcome. That clean expression is powerful because it's not loaded with desperation. When you say, this is what I desire, and this is what I'm available for, without needing the other person to immediately agree. You step into emotional leadership. Avoidants respect emotional leadership because it feels predictable and safe. There is no hidden agenda, no emotional debt being created. You are not saying, I need you to show up so I can feel okay. You are saying, I am okay, and I'm inviting you into my life. Ultimatums create polarity through fear. Emotional self-sufficiency creates polarity through strength. One collapses intimacy, the other expands it. When you are self-sufficient, you don't monitor someone's behavior for reassurance. You observe it for alignment. That shift alone removes a massive amount of tension from the relationship. Avoidants can sense when they are being watched, measured, and evaluated for emotional security. It makes them pull away. But when they sense that you are centered regardless of their fluctuations, curiosity replaces avoidance. This boundary also means you are willing to walk away without drama if your values are not met, not as a threat, but as an act of integrity. You don't need to announce it. Your actions speak. If someone consistently cannot meet you where you are, you don't stay and suffer in silence hoping they will change. You choose yourself. That choice sends a powerful message. Your presence is a privilege, not a right. Emotional self-sufficiency activates something profound. It removes the unconscious, parent-child dynamic that often appears in avoidant connections, where one person becomes the emotional caretaker and the other becomes the emotionally distant child. When you stop over-functioning emotionally, the dynamic equalizes. The avoidant is no longer being carried, managed, or rescued. They are met as an adult, with choice and responsibility. This boundary is deeply aligned with higher principles of truth and order. When you are rooted in yourself, you operate from abundance instead of lack. You give because you want to, not because you fear abandonment. And that purity of intention is felt. It's felt in your tone, your timing, your presence. You no longer chase closeness, you allow it to arise naturally. The paradox is this: when you stop needing someone to stay, you become someone worth staying with. Emotional self-sufficiency doesn't push people away, it filters them. And for an avoidant, it is the one boundary that feels like freedom instead of pressure, respect instead of demand, and invitation instead of control. Trust is not built through intensity, promises, or emotional declarations. It is built through alignment. Consistency between words and actions is the quiet language of integrity, and integrity is what creates safety. For someone with avoidant tendencies, safety is everything. They may not articulate it, but they are constantly scanning for signs of unpredictability, emotional volatility, or hidden expectations. When what you say matches what you do, over time, without drama, you become someone their nervous system can relax around. Many people believe being understood is what creates closeness. In reality, being predictable creates closeness. Predictability does not mean boring, it means reliable. When your behavior aligns with your values regardless of mood, fear, or circumstance, you send a powerful signal: you are self-governed. Avoidance respects self-governance because it doesn't ask them to manage your emotions or decode mixed messages. Mixed signals are exhausting. Consistency is calming. Words without follow-through create confusion. Over-promising and under-delivering erodes trust faster than silence ever could. When you say you're okay with space but then act resentful. When you claim independence but subtly punish distance, the inconsistency is felt immediately. Avoidants are particularly sensitive to these discrepancies because they often grew up in environments where emotional messages were unpredictable. Your consistency becomes proof that connection doesn't have to be destabilizing. Actions are the real boundary. Anyone can say, "This matters to me." But when your behavior contradicts your words, your credibility collapses. If you say you value respect but tolerate disregard, you teach others that your words carry no weight. Avoidants take that lesson seriously. They respond not to what you say you want, but to what you are willing to accept. The moment your actions align with your stated standards, the dynamic shifts. Consistency also means emotional consistency. You don't swing between closeness and withdrawal as a way to regulate anxiety. You don't punish with silence or reward with over-availability. Your presence is steady. That steadiness becomes an anchor. For an avoidant, who often associates closeness with chaos or obligation, your emotional stability reframes intimacy as something manageable rather than overwhelming. When your words and actions match, you remove the need for negotiation. You don't argue your boundaries, you live them. If you say you need clear communication, and then you disengage calmly when communication disappears, the message is clear without confrontation. This kind of clarity feels respectful rather than controlling. Avoidants are more likely to lean in when they don't feel cornered by emotional debates. Trust is cumulative. It's built in small moments. Showing up when you say you will, leaving when you say you will, following through even when it's inconvenient. These moments create a pattern. And patterns are what the nervous system responds to. Avoidants may not consciously acknowledge it, but over time they begin to feel safer because you are no longer a question mark. You are consistent. Consistency does not mean perfection. It means repair. When you make a mistake, you acknowledge it without defensiveness and correct your behavior. That willingness to self-correct without self-betrayal demonstrates maturity. Avoidants respect accountability because it removes the fear of being trapped in unresolved emotional tension. There is also a deeper, almost spiritual aspect to consistency. When you live in alignment, you are congruent. Your inner truth and outer expression match. That congruence carries authority. People feel it. It creates a sense of groundedness that doesn't demand attention but commands respect. Avoidants, who are often guarded against emotional intrusion, instinctively relax around congruent individuals. Inconsistency breeds anxiety. Consistency breeds trust. When your life reflects your words, when your boundaries, choices, and behavior tell the same story, you become someone who feels safe to take seriously. Not because you insist on it, but because your integrity leaves no room for doubt. Over-availability often disguises itself as kindness, loyalty, or emotional generosity, but beneath it usually lives fear. The fear of being replaced, forgotten, or deemed unimportant. When you are always accessible, always accommodating, always ready to drop your priorities, you unintentionally communicate that your time and energy are not valuable. Avoidant individuals are acutely aware of this imbalance. They may not consciously intend to exploit it, but the dynamic quietly erodes respect and attraction. Polarity is created by difference, not sameness. It thrives when two whole individuals meet, not when one person orbits the other. Overavailability collapses polarity because it removes mystery, autonomy, and choice. When someone knows you will always be there regardless of how they show up, the relational energy flattens. Avoidants, who already struggle with intimacy, feel even less motivation to move towards someone who is always emotionally present without discernment. Removing overavailability is not withdrawal or punishment. It is a return to self-honor. It means you stop bending your schedule, emotions, and standards around someone else's unpredictability. You continue to live your life fully, pursuing your goals, nurturing other relationships, honoring your rest, whether or not they reach out. This grounded independence restores balance. It says, I choose connection, but I don't sacrifice myself for it. When you are no longer instantly responsive or endlessly flexible, you introduce natural boundaries. These boundaries create space, and space is essential for desire. Avoidants often need room to feel their own interests without being flooded by someone else's presence. When you give that room without resentment, you allow their curiosity to emerge organically. Instead of feeling chased, they feel invited. Overavailability also creates an unconscious power imbalance. One person becomes the emotional constant, the other becomes the decider. That imbalance breeds complacency on one side and quiet resentment on the other. By pulling back from constant availability, you rebalance the dynamic. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing when and how you engage. That shift is subtle but profound. Respect grows when your presence is intentional rather than automatic. When you don't immediately answer every message. When you don't always initiate. When you don't rescue moments of distance with reassurance. You communicate self-trust. You trust that connection doesn't need to be micromanaged. Avoidants respect this because it removes pressure and restores autonomy. Two things they deeply value. Removing overavailability also forces clarity. It reveals whether someone is genuinely interested or simply comfortable. When you stop filling every gap, you allow the other person's effort, or lack of it, to become visible. This is not a test, it's information. And information empowers you to make aligned choices instead of emotional ones. There is also a deeper energetic truth at play. What you give without limit loses perceived value. What you offer with discernment becomes precious. When your time, attention, and emotional presence are given intentionally, they carry weight. Avoidants, who often fear being engulfed, feel safer engaging with someone who knows when to step forward and when to step back. Removing overavailability requires tolerating discomfort. Silence may arise, distance may increase temporarily. This is where many people panic and rush back into overgiving. But staying grounded through that discomfort builds inner strength. It shows that your sense of worth is not dependent on constant contact or reassurance. As you reclaim your space, something shifts. You feel more centered. Your life feels fuller. And paradoxically, that fullness makes you more attractive. Not because you are withholding, but because you are whole. Polarity is restored when two individuals meet from choice rather than need. And in that space of choice, respect has room to grow. Boundaries are not lessons delivered through lectures or emotional explanations. They are demonstrated through lived behavior. Every interaction you have is quietly teaching others how to treat you, not through what you ask for, but through what you allow. When your boundaries are clear and embodied, they communicate self-worth more effectively than any conversation ever could. Avoidant individuals, in particular, pay close attention to behavior over words. They may dismiss emotional appeals, but they never ignore patterns. Self-worth is not declared, it is modeled. If you say you deserve respect, but tolerate disregard, the message that lands is confusion. People, especially avoidants, trust what is consistent. When your boundaries are firm and calm, they learn that access to you requires consideration. Not because you punish or withdraw dramatically, but because you remain aligned with your values regardless of someone else's comfort level. Many people believe setting boundaries means explaining themselves repeatedly until they are understood. In reality, over-explaining often signals uncertainty. When you justify your limits excessively, you invite negotiation. Avoidants tend to disengage when boundaries feel like emotional negotiations because it triggers their instinct to escape. Modeling self-worth looks different. You state your boundary once clearly, and then you live it. Your follow-through becomes the teacher. For example, if you value consistency, you don't chase inconsistency while explaining why it hurts you. You acknowledge the mismatch and adjust your availability. That adjustment is not a punishment, it is alignment. Through that alignment, you demonstrate that your time and emotional energy are valuable. Avoidants take that seriously because it removes ambiguity. They know where you stand without feeling pressured to perform. Boundaries also teach through consequence, not confrontation. Consequence doesn't mean punishment, it means reality. If someone repeatedly crosses a line, access changes. Tone stays calm, drama stays absent. This kind of response communicates emotional maturity. Avoidants feel safer around maturity because it doesn't threaten their autonomy. They can choose how to show up without being controlled, while still understanding that behavior has impact. When you model self-worth, you stop rescuing others from the natural outcomes of their choices. You don't soften every edge or absorb every discomfort to keep the connect. Ion alive. That overfunctioning erodes respect. Avoidance may unconsciously rely on it, but it reinforces their belief that intimacy requires someone else to carry the emotional load. When you stop doing that, the dynamic equalizes. You meet as two adults, not as caretaker and distant partner. There is a subtle strength in consistency. Each time you honor your boundary, you reinforce an internal belief, I matter. That belief shapes your posture, your tone, your timing. People sense it. Avoidants, who are often guarded against emotional intrusion, are drawn to individuals who feel solid rather than reactive. Your self-worth becomes something they experience, not something you argue for. Modeling self-worth also means you don't abandon your truth to avoid discomfort. You are willing to be misunderstood rather than self-betray. This is a powerful teaching moment. It shows that your identity is not dependent on approval. Avoidants respect this because it signals independence. Independence feels safe to them. Over time, your boundaries create a container. Within that container, interaction becomes clearer, cleaner, and more honest. People either rise to meet the standard or remove themselves. Both outcomes serve your well-being. Avoidants who are capable of growth often respond to this clarity with increased respect and effort. Those who are not simply fade without chaos. At a deeper level, teaching others how to treat you is an act of service. It sets a standard for healthy relating. When you model self-worth, you invite others into a more conscious way of connecting. You show that love does not require self-erasure, and closeness does not demand sacrifice of integrity. Boundaries lived with calm conviction become a mirror. They reflect back to others what is possible when self-respect leads, and in that reflection, even the most avoidant individuals begin to take you seriously, not because you demanded it, but because your way of being left them no other option. Calm firmness is one of the most underrated forces in human connection. It doesn't shout, threaten, or plead. It doesn't need to dominate the room. It simply stands its ground with composure and clarity. For avoidant individuals, this quality is profoundly disarming. Emotional pressure feels invasive to them, but calm firmness feels safe. It communicates strength without aggression, and boundaries without control. Most people attempt to create closeness by intensifying emotion, raising their voice, repeating their needs, emphasizing how much something hurts. While this may feel honest, it often overwhelms an avoidant nervous system. Emotional pressure, even when well-intentioned, is experienced as demand. Demand triggers withdrawal. Calm firmness, on the other hand, carries the same message without the charge. It says, "This is my truth, and I am steady in it," without asking the other person to fix, soothe, or comply. Firmness is not rigidity. It is clarity backed by self-trust. When you are firm, you are clear about what you are available for and what you are not. When you are calm, that clarity is delivered without fear. Avoidants respond to this because it removes the threat of emotional escalation. There is nothing to fight against, nothing to escape from, only information to respond to. Calm firmness also builds trust because it is predictable. Your tone doesn't change based on whether someone agrees with you. You don't become colder when disappointed or warmer when appeased. This emotional consistency creates a sense of safety. Avoidants often grew up in environments where emotional responses were unpredictable. Calm firmness tells a different story. Connection does not equal chaos. When you express boundaries calmly, you demonstrate emotional regulation. You show that you can hold your ground without losing yourself. This is deeply reassuring to someone who fears being engulfed by another's emotions. They don't feel responsible for managing your feelings. Instead, they feel free to choose how they want to engage. Emotional pressure often carries an unspoken message. I need you to change so I can feel okay. Calm firmness carries a different message. I am okay, and this is how I operate. That distinction is critical. One creates resistance, the other creates respect. Avoidants are far more likely to take someone seriously when they don't feel like the weight of emotional regulation is being placed on them. Calm firmness also ends power struggles before they begin. There is no back and forth, no escalation, no emotional tug of war. You state your boundary once and then allow space. This space is not withdrawal, it is trust in your own position. Avoidants respect this because it honors autonomy. They are not cornered into responding a certain way, which lowers their instinct to retreat. There is an inner strength required to remain calm while being firm. It means you are not attached to immediate validation. You are willing to be uncomfortable without abandoning your truth. That willingness is felt. It signals confidence. And confidence, especially when paired with kindness, is magnetic. Calm firmness also invites accountability without blame. When you address an issue without accusation, you make it easier for the other person to reflect rather than defend. Avoidants often shut down when they feel criticized. Calm firmness removes the sharp edges, allowing responsibility to be taken without shame. At a deeper level, calm firmness reflects alignment between your inner state and outer expression. There is no contradiction between what you feel and how you act. This congruence creates integrity. People trust integrity because it is rare. Avoidants who are highly attuned to emotional incongruence instinctively relax around it. Ultimately, calm firmness changes the emotional atmosphere. It slows things down. It grounds the interaction. It transforms boundaries from threats into truths. And when boundaries feel like truths rather than ultimatums, they invite respect. Avoidants don't move toward intensity. They move toward stability. Calm firmness embodies stability. It shows that closeness does not require emotional chaos, and honesty does not require force. In that space, trust has room to grow. Control often disguises itself as care. It shows up as over-planning conversations, anticipating reactions, managing outcomes, or subtly steering a connection in the direction you hope it will go. While these behaviors may come from fear or desire for closeness, they quietly suffocate authenticity. Avoidant individuals are especially sensitive to this kind of control because it threatens their autonomy. The moment they feel managed, they begin to pull away. Letting go of control is not passivity, it is an act of deep trust that invites genuine choice and real connection. When you stop trying to control outcomes, you shift from manipulation, conscious or unconscious, into presence. Presence is powerful. It allows people to show you who they are without interference. Avoidants respond to presence because it doesn't demand performance. It doesn't trap them in expectations. It gives them room to choose how, when, and whether they engage. And choice is essential for anyone who values freedom. Control is often rooted in the belief that if you do or say the right thing, you can secure the result you want. But connection doesn't thrive under optimization. It thrives under truth. When you release control, you allow the relationship to unfold based on reality rather than effort. This creates a cleaner dynamic. You're no longer trying to convince, persuade, or manage. You're observing, responding, and aligning. Letting go of control also means releasing attachment to timing. You stop rushing intimacy or demanding clarity before it naturally emerges. Avoidants need time to process their emotions internally. When you allow that time without pressure, you demonstrate respect for their internal rhythm. This respect builds trust. It tells them, I'm not here to force anything. I'm here to see what's real. There is a paradox at work. The less you try to secure connection, the more space you create for it to deepen. Control tightens. Trust opens. When you stop monitoring every signal or interpreting every silence, your nervous system settles. That calm becomes contagious. Avoidants, who are often hyper-aware of emotional demands, feel relief in your non-attachment. Letting go of control also restores your dignity. You no longer contort yourself to maintain connection. You don't overfunction emotionally or sacrifice your needs to keep someone close. You allow consequences to exist. If someone chooses distance, you accept it without chasing. This acceptance is not indifference. It is self-respect. And self-respect is far more compelling than persuasion. Choice is sacred. When someone chooses you freely without pressure or fear, that choice has depth. Avoidants, more than most, need to feel that their decisions are their own. When you let go of control, you remove the invisible strings. What remains is authenticity. They can approach without losing themselves. This boundary also requires courage. You must be willing to face outcomes you cannot manipulate. You must trust that whatever unfolds will reveal truth. That trust is a form of inner strength. It signals that you believe you will be okay regardless of the result. Avoidants sense this and relax because they no longer feel responsible for your emotional outcome. At a deeper level, letting go of control aligns with a higher order of relationship. It honors free will. It recognizes that love coerced is not love at all. When you release control, you step into partnership rather than possession. You create a space where both people can stand as equals. Avoidants often test freedom unconsciously. They pull away to see if they will be chased or allowed to be. And you allow them to be without resentment or manipulation, something shifts. Curiosity replaces defense. They begin to feel the difference between someone who needs them and someone who chooses them. Ultimately, letting go of control is an act of faith. Faith in yourself, faith in truth, and faith in the natural intelligence of connection. It clears the fog created by fear and effort, and in that clarity, authentic choice becomes possible. When someone chooses you from that place, the connection is real, grounded, and sustainable. When your life is anchored in purpose and values, your presence carries a different weight. You are no longer moving through relationships searching for identity, validation, or direction. You are bringing a fully formed self into the connection. This alignment is felt immediately, especially by avoidant individuals who are highly attuned to emotional undercurrents. They may not be able to name it, but they sense when someone is centered versus when someone is seeking. Purpose acts as an internal compass. It organizes your decisions, your time, and your energy. When you are aligned with what matters to you, your growth, your contribution, your spiritual grounding, you stop orbiting around another person's availability. Relationships become a part of your life, not the center of it. This shift changes the dynamic completely. Avoidants feel less pressure because they are no longer the axis around which your emotional world turns. Values give you structure. They define what you stand for and what you will not compromise. When your actions consistently reflect your values, you become congruent. Congruence creates trust. Avoidants often withdraw from relationships where they sense emotional inconsistency or hidden expectations. Alignment removes that ambiguity. You are the same person regardless of proximity or distance. That stability feels safe. When you are aligned with purpose, you don't chase connection to fill emptiness. You share connection from fullness. This fullness is magnetic. It doesn't demand attention, it attracts it. Avoidants are drawn to people who have a life they respect, not people who need to be constantly reassured. Your commitment to your path, whether it's creative, professional, spiritual, or service-oriented, signals independence. Independence is deeply appealing to someone who fears enmeshment. Purpose also fortifies you during uncertainty. When distance appears or communication fluctuates, you don't collapse into rumination. You return to what grounds you. This self-regulation communicates resilience. Avoidants feel safer around resilient people because they don't fear being the sole source of stability. Your life has momentum beyond the relationship. Values-driven living also sharpens discernment. You no longer tolerate misalignment for the sake of attachment. You assess compatibility through behavior, not potential. This discernment is quiet but firm. Avoidants take this seriously because it removes emotional chaos. They know where you stand without feeling judged or pressured. There is also a spiritual dimension to alignment. When you live in accordance with higher principles, truth, integrity, service, growth, you operate from a deeper source of confidence. You are not trying to extract meaning from relationships. You are expressing meaning through them. This creates an energetic authority. People feel it as presence. Avoidants, who often guard against emotional intensity, feel grounded around presence that is rooted in something larger than the relationship itself. Alignment with purpose also means you are willing to let go of connections that distract you from your path. This willingness is not cold, it is clean. You don't cling to what dilutes your values. You honor what supports your evolution. That clarity commands respect. Avoidants sense when someone is not afraid to walk away from misalignment, and paradoxically, that fearlessness often draws them closer. When your life is aligned, you don't need to prove your worth. Your choices demonstrate it. You invest your energy where it is reciprocated and meaningful. You don't overextend to be chosen. This self-selection changes the relational field. Avoidants, who are sensitive to imbalance, feel less compelled to retreat when they are not being asked to carry your sense of purpose. Ultimately, alignment makes your presence undeniable because it is integrated. There is no fragmentation between who you are alone and who you are with others. That integration creates calm confidence. It speaks without words, and in that quiet authority you become someone who is not just noticed but respected. When you live on purpose, connection becomes a meeting of two paths rather than a search for direction. And in that meeting, even the most avoidant individuals recognize the strength of someone who is deeply, unmistakably aligned. Thank you for taking this journey of insight and self-empowerment. May these words continue to guide you back to your strength and truth. Goodbye for now, and remember, when you honor yourself, the right connections will always find their way to you.